for it. Today is the day all of you have been waiting for. Because it is the day I eat crow. If you've been keeping up with my Miss Peregrine series review, you'll know I had some things to say in Conference of the Birds, and I was wrong. It happens. It just goes to show how some books have been read more than others, because I simply did not remember them being picked up in the Desolations of Devil's Acre. And so here I am telling you, ignore things that I've said. I was wrong. I can admit it. To start with is the girl on the cover. This girl right here who's holding the doll and on a phone, and I said had absolutely nothing to do with anything. Granted, I do wish Riggs had done more with her, but the purpose of this right now is to say she does come into play. So I guess I need to shut my mouth about the fact that he's not using his book cover pictures to their greatest potential. I don't think I actually mentioned this, but I definitely was thinking it, was Horatio H's Hologast. I could not remember Horatio coming back into play in the Desolations of Devil's Acre, which I have the book somewhere. I went through all of my boxes trying to find it, and I couldn't, which is sort of freaking me out, because even though it's not my favorite, I'm still more of a fan of the original trilogy than the second trilogy. I want my book. Okay, it's a hardcover, and it's pretty, and I want my freaking book. So hopefully it just got tucked away with other stuff, because I'm sort of in living limbo right now. But I'm not going to worry about that. I'm just not. Back to Horatio. I did not remember him coming into play in the Desolations of Devil's Acre, and I was like, how in the world could you leave me with him turning from Hologast to white and then jumping out a window and never referencing him again? But he does come back, and he has actually a bigger, sorry, my hair, I don't like that thing, but this is mirrored, so I keep trying to fix the wrong thing. See, it's back, yeah, it's back. I think it's time for trim. Anyways, he does play a bigger part than I remembered, so I was satisfied. I was pleased that Riggs didn't forget that one element. As per the story, it wasn't too bad. It really wasn't. I remember being really confused about certain parts, particularly concerning Caul and how he would appear in Devil's Acre, and even how he would cause the desolations, because I didn't understand how he was able to do that, because he initially does physical manifestations, and then when the acre is essentially sealed against him, he does mental and emotional desolations. That was stuff from my first read-through, my original read-through, that I remember being confused about. And then this read-through, I was like, okay, like, I remember the big head in the sky, and now I'm like, okay, now I know why there was a big head in the sky. I still don't understand how he was able to manifest desolations, because I guess I don't have a good grasp on his new powers, and then that led to questions, which it doesn't necessarily affect the book, but for me, I found that I wanted more. I did find myself wanting more about her brothers, about Bentham and Caul, and even about the Whites, and like what their abilities had been before they started this whole thing back a couple hundred years ago. I know they're not Imbrans, Imbrans can only be women, but Caul can turn into a peregrine falcon, so was he peculiar? Was Bentham peculiar? Like, what were their peculiarities? And then the Whites, sometimes it felt like they had peculiarities after they went from hologas to white, but I didn't think they could have peculiarities. But anyways, I just found myself wanting to know more background information on Caul and everything that surrounded him. Anyways, the plot. It picks up where Conference of the Birds ends, and I'm gonna stop here and say it's super duper confusing, incredibly chaotic, and I did not care for it. Even going from book to book to book to book, I thought it was a bit much. We as writers are advised against doing things that start off with like dreams and whatnot, and that is essentially what Riggs does in the Desolations of Devil's Acre. Is he starts with Jacob kind of in this no man's land, because at the end of Conference of the Birds, he and Nor had been in a collapsing loop. And then all of a sudden, he's like floating through time and space, having conversations with his dead grandfather. And it's really strange. It's really chaotic. And then when he comes to, you don't really know what's real or what's not real. And then all of a sudden, there's this girl. And so I didn't like the way it opened, both in the storytelling as well as how Riggs has this habit of moving from first person to like third person omniscient, where it doesn't use characters' names. So it's like the Light Eater. Just call her Nor. So and I'm just gonna leave it there. So I did not care for the beginning. However, this is actually something that I thought was gonna happen in the Conference of the Birds, but it actually happened here. So now I'm like, thank goodness I wasn't crazy for remembering this scene. But he and Nor had escaped V's collapsing loop because V had this device that is kind of like a failsafe, where something happens, it will transport her, I guess, to a specific location. And this specific location was Jacob's grandfather's house. He, Nor, and V, who was dead, were all transported to this house. It just so happens that there's a white there along with a hologast, which is another question. I felt like Riggs, kind of like at the very beginning of the series, where he made it seem like there's a ton of peculiar children at Miss Peregrine's when there's really only like 10 or something. It's like he keeps killing off all the bad guys, only realizing that he actually needs more bad guys. So he just comes up with this excuse of, oh, well, I guess we didn't get rid of all of them. So they just keep reappearing. And then, so I'm jumping ahead of myself here, Caul recreates hologast. Like, he makes new hologast. And I'm like, how? Because I thought the hologasts were the people, the peculiars that had been with him in that initial loop that had imploded. When we get to the end of Desolations of Devil's Acre, it's like he breeds them. It's like he grows them. And so I was confused. I mean, it is a new type of holocast, so I guess maybe he creates them differently than he had before. But it seemed to me that Riggs had to kind of retcon things that he had established earlier in order to make the book progress. But as I was saying, there's a white. We never get a valid explanation. Somehow there's a white at Abe's house, and Nor kills him before he can kill Jacob, and then, well, duh, if there's a white there, there's a hologast there, and so they outrun the hologast. So I guess what happens is they escape V's loop, which was basically at the center of 2 tornadoes, only to wind up in Florida in the midst of a hurricane. At first, I was like, maybe they brought the storm with them. And then I was like, well, maybe there just happened to be another storm. I don't know. As I said, it's really chaotic. But moving forward, they managed to escape the hologast. get to Jacob's house only to encounter some police there because neighbors had reported burglars, or maybe it was just because that dog Addison, who I still think is incredibly annoying and kind of useless, maybe because Addison is hanging around and they're like, oh, there's a wild animal around here, like, get rid of it. In any case, who is he? Jacob nor Addison, they escape. They get back to Devil's Acre for everybody to be like, oh my gosh, you're alive. What happened to you? And then they have to explain. And then, the adults are like, so basically, you just walked away without telling anybody and put yourselves in danger. And I'm like, you've got a really good point there. And I'm still not a Nora fan. By the end of the book, I'm not a Nora fan. I think she's completely pointless. Like, I understand the point of her, but as a character, there's nothing to her. Anything that is remotely interesting is nothing about what she does. It's like she's a yes man. But Jacob, I kind of wanted to see a bit more growth from him. He just felt like a renegade who wanted to do things his way. His peculiar ability to see hologast, it got a little weird, but I got tired of him not being able to use his own peculiarity. At the beginning of the series, I'm completely okay with him not knowing what to do because he didn't even know he was peculiar and he has to learn it. But over and over and over, he has to relearn how to control and communicate with hollows. And I was like, Jacob, for once, can you just know what to do and do it before you put everybody in danger? They get back to Devil's Acre and they're like, yeah, we're fine, only to learn about these desolations, which are essentially just bad things that Caul is inflicting, raining down upon the residents of Devil's Acre. Not too far into the future, he rains down propaganda that casts doubt on the Imbrans and on what they say and what they do. And I was just like, I still don't know how he got his information. A little bit of a spoiler, there is one girl who is like an Imbran in training, I think, that I guess that they got on their side. It's not explained. We only get to a certain point where Jacob hears a white talking to her through his watch. I think we had Apple Watches by the time that this book was written. Or maybe it's just because this is fiction and Riggs was like, I'm gonna have people communicating through their watches. Jacob hears the name and he eventually puts it together that this is an Imbran in training, so maybe she was a double agent feeding Caul information. I don't really know. However, the whole Acre is brought together by the Imbrans, essentially to say, we have a plan about how to ward ourselves against Caul. We're going to create a quilt, which we all know is going to fail because even the Imbrans are helpless to defeat Caul, which poses another question for me, and that is, what good is an Imbran? They can turn into birds, they can instate loops, but what power do they have? They have knowledge because they're old, but what power do they have? I don't know. As they are rallying the troops, Caul shows his face for the first time. Like, there had been whisperings that maybe Caul was back. Horace had been having nightmares. Jacob had been having nightmares. Miss Peregrine had been having nightmares. And now, yes, there is proof that Caul is back because he shows up and does this really strange monologue that, I mean, yes, it shows that he's cuckoo for Cocoa Puffs, but it still bothers me. It's so strange. He basically has a call to arms saying somebody needs to kill Jacob and Nor. And this one peculiar, we never learn if he's just heeding Caul's words or if maybe he's under a spell or if maybe he was on Caul's side in the first place. In any case, everybody runs for cover, and this is when the propaganda starts. Word gets out that the Imbrans had promised the American leaders loop freedom, because at the end of the initial trilogy, Jacob and his friends had been inside the Library of Souls when that loop collapsed, and that reset their internal clocks. And so the Imbrans had been working on a way to do this to all peculiars, and there had been great unrest about this. Then when word gets out that they had promised the American leaders this and nobody else, it's like, oh, well, death to the Imbrans. Then it comes to Jacob and Nor that they have to get Nor to a secret location, because this is where the girl from Conference of the Birds comes in, because the Imbrans and their network had received word of these really strange phone calls. Hence, and they're like, okay, well, all of this harkens back to a prophecy made by Bob, which I'm like, I mean, that's kind of clever that this really integral person to a peculiar community is named something as boring as Bob, but at the same time, his name is Bob. We already knew that Nor was part of this prophecy, but now we have these phone calls and it lines up with the 7 that can defeat Caul. They have to get her to this discreet location. The book in and of itself is really interesting. I enjoy Riggs' storytelling and his world building, particularly when it comes to the loops and to the history and to the things that go along with being peculiar. It's when we get into Jacob and his personal life and kind of other little things of character and characterization that I'm not quite sold on. Jacob and a handful of his cohorts are accompanying Nor to this location. When they get there, they find out that all 7 are not going to show up for various reasons. Maybe they've already died, or maybe they're like, see you later, I'm not waiting around. It turns out there's Nor, 2 other girls, and then 1 boy. One of the girls is this girl here. I don't remember her name. I probably should have looked it up, but honestly, I don't really care. The thing about this girl and the way that they figure out how to find this loop is the doll. His name is Pensivus, or Penny for short. His story comes from Tales of the Peculiar, just like a lot of others, where they're grounded in truth, but then they're very fictionalized. So we don't really know how much of it is true, but the story goes that this girl, her father dies, and he's like, I don't want to leave you alone. So he goes into her doll, her teddy bear, or whatever that thing is. He just whispers to her and gets her through things, but then one day she loses him, and he kind of just goes from peculiar to peculiar child, kind of leading them to where they need to go. And even at one point, Nor had possessed Penny. I thought this could have gone so much further, but all we get is Nor being like, I had a doll named Penny once. Okay. Where did Penny take you? Like, how did Penny help you? If that is what Penny's purpose was, like, what did Penny do for you, and then how did you lose Penny? There was so much that could have been done with that, but since nothing was done with it, honestly, I didn't feel the need for it to be there, except that it gave Nor license to be like, oh, Penny, you know? They're at this location, and they encounter Caul's, well, first, 2 whites show up with a hologas. Turns out one of the whites is Horatio, who is, posing in order to come find them. And then Caul's first lieutenant Murnau shows up, as well as another white, and they have been imbued with spirits, like ancient peculiar spirits, and so now they're massive, monstrous, beastie thingies. They're tearing this loop apart. Jacob, his friends, the Light Eaters, plus Horatio all escape, but they have to get across war-torn France, which I think is fantastic. Like, it's just really, really interesting the way that Riggs incorporates history into his stories. Then they have to get across war-torn France to the loop that brings them back to present-day France, and then they have to get on the train to get them to London. Caul shows up, and he is pursuing them, and they're able to escape, but it is at the risk of destroying Penny. I don't quite know how it happens. I wish it hadn't happened because I don't feel like we got enough of Penny. Because Penny was this very informative, wise mentor figure, the person that can get you through your situations and give you the information you need to get through those situations. And then all of a sudden, Penny's been sliced open, and that essence that made Penny Penny is gone. At the same time, Horatio gets gravely injured, as does the male light eater. I gotta admit, I guess I stopped paying attention because I really don't understand what happens next, except that they do make it back to Devil's Acre. Well, actually, first, they have to sink the boat carrying all of Caul's new hollows. It turns out that it is a cruise ship, and I guess what we're led to believe is that the whites fed the passengers of this cruise ship to the hollows because it's completely empty, except for maybe one or two dead bodies. And while hollows obviously prefer peculiars, I guess a hollow has to eat, right? They team up with Sharon, who gets them their explosives, and they realize there's not enough explosives for a cruise ship. Everybody but Sharon gets on this cruise ship, locates they're captured because they just have terrible plans. They're sealed in with these hologhast, only for them to then, yes, blow up this little space of the ship. And in doing so, it knocks Jacob out. It knocks everybody out, including the hollows. And when he reawakens, he has connected with these new hollows because they are as such that they're just a bigger, stronger, better breed, and they no longer respond to him the way that they should. In fact, it's almost counterintuitive, counterproductive. Like everything he does, they can use against him. But now he has woken up, and just like in the original trilogy, he has become one with the hollows. This bothers me only because this is exactly what Riggs did the first time around. It continues to show me that Jacob is not the savior. He's not a capable protagonist. He cannot succeed on his own. It's not like I have to have people with me to win. Like, I'm fine with that. You know, sometimes we need help. But he has no control over his own peculiarity, yet everybody's making this huge deal out of him. That's why it was so problematic that Riggs used the exact same scenario to connect Jacob to these hollows. There was no way that he could get Jacob to use his own wit and intelligence to figure out how to be a hollow wrangler again. Anyways, so he uses the hollows to get them out of this situation and back into Devil's Acre, where, wouldn't you know it, because this is when the White was talking to the Imbrin in training through his watch, and she assassinates an Imbrin, which then breaks that quilt protection. Now Caul and his minions have infiltrated the Acre. Here we go, Jacob. And this is something that I kind of have a problem with, is that the insinuation is, without Jacob and his hollows, the peculiars would have lost. What does that say about the peculiars? That they can't win without Jacob, and then Jacob can't win without his hollows. So I wish that I'd had a little bit of reassurance that these people could have fended for themselves. Ultimately, yes, we need someone to come in and nail that final nail in the coffin. But it was like, without Jacob, they wouldn't have done anything. It's also at this point where what we learn is the Light Eaters have to consume Caul's light. And they have discovered that he has this pulsing blue light inside of him, and that is what has given him his new power. We also learn that he is still anchored to the Library of Souls in some form or fashion. We're down one Light Eater, and then one of the other Light Eaters is like, okay, it is my time to shine. I'm gonna go eat his light. So she goes, she eats his light, falls off a cliff with Caul, and then He resurfaces, fine and dandy, so obviously she's dead. The third light eater, I'm like, what in the world happened to her? And this is what I'm telling you, that I must have stopped paying attention for a period of time, because all of a sudden Nora is the only one left. So there we go, and she is bound and determined to fight Caul by herself, because she absolutely positively knows exactly what to do. And for me, this is problematic because she is similar to Jacob. So I feel like I'm talking out of both sides of my mouth here, because I like Jacob and I had no problem with him coming in completely clueless and then becoming a hero. But I feel like because Nor is a yes person and she's really had no time to become acclimated or informed about everything that's going on, I was like, why in the world do you now think you can do everything by yourself? It just really bothered me. It's compounded by the fact that I'm Team Emma and I have not connected with Nor enough to root for her. They defeat Caul's minions, but Caul gets away. Nora's the only light year left. Everybody's like, we gotta evacuate the Acre. It is no longer safe here. But Jacob, and this part's kind of cool, kind of weird. He is awoken at night by whisperings. Horace points at him and is like, because Horace is the guy who has prophetic dreams or nightmares, and he's like, oh, you're a monster, you're a monster. Jacob is like, I gotta go for a walk. He continues to hear these whisperings, and it leads him to Nim, who is Bentham's assistant, and Nim is like, oh yeah, Mr. Bentham's in the bathroom or wherever, and I was like, seriously? Like, it's so strange, but it's kind of cool. Because we don't really know what happened to Bentham, because obviously Caul got the upper hand. Caul is the one who's reigning terror, which means that he defeated Bentham in some shape, form, or fashion. I guess what it is Caul consumed Bentham, but in a way, Bentham's like a parasite, and whenever Caul isn't conscious, then Bentham can reach out. So this is what's going on, is Bentham is reaching out to Jacob in this spectral form, and he tells him how to get to the Library of Souls, because this is where Caul is anchored. Jacob has to go defeat him. At the same time, we learn that Nor has fooled everybody and has gone off on her own because she's going to go defeat Caul. Here's where I get a little bit confused, because she doesn't know where the hidden entrance to the Library of Souls is. Jacob only gets discovered by Miss Peregrine, Emma, and Hugh because he left the door open. I mean, I'm kind of glad that he gets some backup, but at the same time, they weren't very helpful backup. So did they really need to follow him there? Actually, maybe it was Bronwyn. I think it was Hugh, Bronwyn, Emma, and Miss Peregrine. Anyways, they're fighting against Caul, and all of a sudden, Nora shows up. And I'm like, had you just still been in the house? Is this how you found your way to the Library of Souls? Like, you kind of did what Peregrine and company did, was you saw the open doorway and you're like, I'm gonna go through the ceiling and see where that leads me? The Light Eater shows up, but not until after Jacob has turned himself into a Hologast, which I'm very confused about this. It is something that Riggs introduced in a prior book about peculiar souls, and how I guess peculiars weren't necessarily meant to just have one peculiarity. Riggs, in my opinion, could have gone a bit further in this explanation. It felt really, really abstract to me. But this all ties into Jacob's peculiarity is particularly special because I guess peculiars have a hologast's nature back in the day, and so this is why Jacob can communicate with Hologast is because he still possesses some of that nature. And this is where Horus's vision comes into play, where Jacob has to become a Hologast in order to defeat Caul. So anyways, Nor shows up after Jacob has turned himself into a massive Hologast, which I'm still trying to figure out how he did it. Was it just a matter of mixing a bunch of peculiar spirits together and consuming them? If so, why did Caul not turn into a Hologast? This is where I don't understand how Riggs's world works. If you do, please explain it to me. Despite the fact that he is a Hologast and Nor was not present for any of this, she is trusting enough to basically realize that it's Jacob? I mean, maybe because his friends are like comatose on the floor, she puts two and two together and is like, he's a good guy. That's Jacob. They are able to defeat Caul. She is able to consume all of his light. Then she releases it and the world starts to crumble. He's already died. Like, basically Miss Peregrine, he reached out to her and he was like, if I'm gonna die, you're coming with me. And she like blows him away, like literally blows on him and he's ash, so he just floats away. It's very, very Voldemort-esque. Not the book, but the movie. It really gave me Harry Potter vibes. Obviously, the next conundrum is Jacob is still a Hologast. So Nor eats the light from him as well, which somehow returns him to his proper form. Again, I don't quite understand it. Maybe it's just a little too high level for my plebeian brain to grasp. But now everything is fine and dandy. We end. I liked how this went full circle, because that is another thing that writers are encouraged to do, is make things come full circle, whether it is metaphorical or literally. And Riggs chose to go literal, and what he did was, if you know, Miss Peregrine's loop had been destroyed, and she and the other Imbrins were able to recreate certain loops, which, again, I do question this, only because it took foresight, and there was never mention of any of this prior to this moment. How did you know to, I don't know, gather dirt or something from your loop? And then where was this dirt? In order for them to recreate loops, they had to have something of those loops. But if all the loops had been destroyed, then I would think that those parts of the loops had been destroyed with them. So this again goes back to the foresight. But with Caul on the rampage, where was it safe enough to store these precious essences of loops? Maybe I'm thinking too much about it, but at the same time, it's because I don't understand. So I'm trying to understand. If you haven't caught on here, she has recreated their loop, and they essentially get to live happily ever after. She and another Imbrin have decided to take on the joint responsibility of being the head Imbrin because Miss Avocet has died, which I thought it was a little strange the way this was approached, because it's very epilogue-y. And it starts off with, Miss Avocet died, blah, 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 blah. Hold on, let me actually find it. Oh, this is the wrong book. I was like, what? Miss Avocet died at dawn. She had fought hard for a long time, but she was weak and worn out and could fight no longer. Blah, 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 blah. Very epilogue-y, not actually an epilogue. It is the last chapter. This then gave me pause because I'd already questioned Imbrins, they're not immortal, but how do they age? How do any of the peculiars age? Because they don't age. So then how can Miss Avocet die? Like, if she's not killed, how can she die? I don't think it's because she aged forward. I don't think she was even injured. I don't know how she died, why she died. I guess I just stopped paying attention. something about her caused her to need to be alert at all times. So she was staying up and kind of overtaxing herself. But if she's not aging, I mean, she might be already elderly, but if she's not aging, I don't really understand how it all comes together to her for her to just die. So we start off with a very epilogue-y final chapter that emphasizes Miss Avocet when I don't feel like there's a whole lot of emphasis on her dying. We do get emphasis on her being tired, on, you know, the worry that if something happens to her, then this quilt of protection could collapse. But I was just like, okay, so Miss Avocet died. Like, why do we care? It does lead into, they finally bury V, do their whole Imbrin thing, or Imbrin burial thing. So, I mean, it was cool to see how that works, but at the same time, I was like, whatever. But because she died, it did leave an opening for a new head Imbrin, and Miss Peregrine was like, her shoes are too big to fill by one person, so 2 people are going to do it, even though it's never been done before, but we're just not able to do it on our own, so there we go. So you guys get to live by yourselves. And that's how it is. Jacob decides not to go back home. Like, he decides not to return to his parents, which is another slight point of contention for me, only because I don't know if I liked how Riggs handled it. I don't argue with Jacob not going back, but I liked how they were actually a presence in the beginning of the series, because a lot of times you read YA and parents just aren't there. So it's like these teenagers are just running amok. So I liked that they were a presence in his life. But then I could understand why Riggs had to get rid of them, because Jacob is trekking around war-torn Europe. His parents can't be in the picture. So it made sense that they actually weren't in the picture, because he wasn't in the present day. And, you know, we do see them again at the end of the first trilogy. But then we get into this trilogy, and it's messy for me, the way that Riggs handled the parents. I like that it was hard, that it wasn't easy, that Jacob's parents weren't just like, yes, we accept you, and, you know, we're gonna live in happily ever after land. But at the same time, it felt forced. I do see why the parents wouldn't accept him as peculiar, but at the same time, I don't. I know it would have been very difficult to believe if we're thinking about it in real time, like this stuff doesn't exist. But at the same time, you get the sense that his parents didn't love him. And I think that's where my problem comes in. Even in the beginning, when it seems like they're trying to do what's best for him, you get the sense that his parents don't like him, that he's an inconvenience. I think that's why I have such an issue with how everything was just handled in the end. I'm fine if Jacob wants to live in the 1940s for the rest of his life. I really don't care if he stays with from his parents, because they don't deserve him. But I was just like, I don't know. Did we have to circle back to that? I mean, we did, because we had to close it. But did we? You just get the sense that Jacob and Nora are going to be together, and Emma's going to be down the hall. I really struggled with the romance. I thought it dragged this second trilogy down because it was completely unnecessary. It weakened points because Jacob, instead of focusing on the task at hand, was so worried about Nor. And I was just like, Nor as a character, in terms of being characterized and developed, was weak. And so why do we have to focus on her at all? I see the importance of her in the grand scheme of things, so sure, she can be here, but do we have to give her any other kind of focus? I really wish we hadn't. I think Jacob could have been a much stronger character if he'd just been like, look, I had my first love, it didn't work out, now I gotta focus on saving the world. It took me a moment to get into the book, but once I found that I had sunk into it, I liked it. And then we would get to certain points that, again, I would get taken out of the storytelling, and it generally had to do with the romance or the characters or things I didn't understand. It was like Riggs stopped telling me a story and started focusing on stuff that didn't matter or things that he had to put in there and he couldn't figure out how to put in there elsewise. Yeah, there's a magic missing from the second trilogy. And so I will wholeheartedly recommend the first trilogy. I will say, yeah, read the second trilogy only because it rounds things out, but it's not my favorite, and I probably would, in the future, I'd probably just stop at the first. There we go. Desolations of Devil's Acre. Let me know what you think. Let me know what your favorite books or book in the series were. Did you like the first three? Did you like the second three? What things do you agree with or disagree with? Do all that liking, subscribing, commenting stuff. And I will see you next time. Bye.